thank you for the introduction. So yes, I am Julien Pivotto, and I am maintaining, and I'm part of the open source world for more than 10 years now, mainly in the monitoring space and automation space. And I am maintaining the Prometheus server for 2 years now, I think, 1 or 2 years. And today, I want to update you about what is new in Prometheus, because a lot of people are using Prometheus, and if you run a version of Prometheus that's 3 years old, it probably still works very well, but still you should upgrade, because we are bringing you many new and exciting features. So I want to cover that, and also a bit about the ecosystem. So we will look into more or less 1 year of news in Prometheus and the project around Prometheus. But we cannot obviously show everything. We only have a few 1 hour, so we will scratch the surface of many things. And there are more updates that you can watch on the PromCon, on the Prometheus YouTube channel from the conference last week, PromCon, where some of those features were dived very deeply into. So there was full talks about some of those features that you can watch if you are interested into them. I also want to take this opportunity to thank every one of you which is using Prometheus, but also contributing to Prometheus. We have contributors for many organizations, many companies are involved in making Prometheus what it is today, and I want to thank everyone. And not only for the new features, but we also have many bug reports and bug fixes that were contributed. So even if you are running a 3 years old Prometheus version and you think it's fine, I can guarantee you that we have bug fixes for you as well in the process. So quick recap on Prometheus. So Prometheus is an open source monitoring solution. So the goal of Prometheus is and remains at this moment to monitor any kind of services and infrastructure that you would have. So we are based on metrics, so it means that we ingest numbers and we provide you a nice way, a nice query language to query your data and to work with your data. We are pool-based. It means that you should ideally be pulling your targets from Prometheus. So Prometheus is like a central piece, and you would pull your different metrics from that model. Even if now we have some support for kind of replication in Prometheus, still at this moment we are still fully pool-based. And we also have service discovery, which means that if you have a way to describe your infrastructure, a CMDB, Kubernetes, anything that would describe your infrastructure, Prometheus can talk to your CMDB or your Kubernetes, your console, your cloud provider to know exactly what it needs to monitor and when, so that your monitoring is always reflecting the reality of your current environment. So Prometheus, so we look at the last year, but this is only 10% of the project lifetime, because it was born around 2012 at SoundCloud, and it was open source in 2015. We joined the CNCF, which is the foundation behind Kubernetes, around 2016, I think, and in 2018 we were one of the first graduated CNCF projects, which shows that there is a huge community and that we did meet all the criteria of the CNCF. So we are quite established project, and that for a very long time. So next to all the new features there, you can expect to have a fully featured monitoring solution next to it. So Prometheus. First thing I want to show you is the new Prometheus UI. Let's launch Prometheus server. Let's see what we have in the configuration. We have pretty basic configuration. Since I will launch that Prometheus without any data, I will point it to our demo server to get some other data, and I will just create some local jobs. So let's try to see if that works. So I'm just launching Prometheus, and we should be able to. Okay, so if you have been using, one way to know if you are using a recent Prometheus version or not is to see if you have a Prometheus logo on the top, on the corner, because that was something that we added quite recently. And if you have that, then you know that you are on the new Prometheus UI, the UI that has all the new fancy features that I'm about to show you. So the classic UI was completely removed this year. So now we have this fancy new UI. One of the features that we have in this new UI is we have nice auto-completion. So if I type a random query, like I directly have completion that comes to mind, so I can see all the different things that I can do. If I start typing a rate command, for example, it will tell me, okay, this is the rate command, and you can start the parentheses, and then you can type just query. You can see now that if I run this query, it will probably not work because Prometheus HTTP request total in my query is underlined in red, which means that if I try to execute, it probably will not work. If I fix the query now, the red underline is gone, and I know that I can run my query. So next to that, we have a metric explorer, so you can find your Prometheus metrics. And we also have a new thing, which is like you can now format the expression. So while you are building very complex Prometheus queries, you can just click on that button, and it will just format the query for you. So if we completely mess up the way that we write the query, and then that's maybe what you will find in your Prometheus rules, that kind of things, you can just click the format button now, and it will just like format everything. If you have more complex query, like let's try something like this. And maybe let's try to mess with that a bit more. Just making a nice query for you, and add +3. This works, and if I format it now, I have a representation, and that shows me also how Prometheus will compute that. So we will first do these two, and then add that one, and then add 3 at the end. So you can format your query easily now in the new UI. So you also have the query history, which is stored locally on your laptop, but this is not something new. And if you have not seen it before, we also have added an option to use the local time when you visualize the data. So now we have, like, we know that it's 11:23, and well, if you don't use that, you have the classic Prometheus UTC-based graph. So if we go over the other pages that we have, what's interesting is that we now have easy filtering available on the targets page. So if I start looking for Prometheus, I have all the labels, all the targets that will match Prometheus itself. So that's also a handy way to find your targets when you have thousands and thousands of targets, which is one of the things that has been improved with this release, that in the classic UI, when you have thousands and thousands of targets, it was not easy to see them in the UI. Now we are loading them a bit more efficiently, so this will help a lot. And this is the same for the command line flags. So the command line flags are also searchable now. So you can just type anything, and it will find the command line flags that you are looking for, so you don't need to look for everything. So if you, for example, we have a new feature called the Prometheus agent. If you want to know all the feature flags related to the agent, you could just like type agent, and you would see, well, on the top basically we have all the storage.agent flags that are available for you to use. And we also have the service discovery page also now has filtering, but I guess you have understood the principle now. And it's 2022, so you need to be cool. So we also added dark mode to the Prometheus UI. So when you work at 3 a.m. to find the cause of your alert, you can just jump to dark mode and see your metrics in that shiny new UI. And you can also say, just use my device default. Oh, and no, I broke it. Anyway. So the new autocomplete stuff is really nice. We will see a bit later with another tool how it was also used in another project. So, agent mode, so basically a lot of people are using Prometheus to scrape and to do service discovery, but they don't really need to store the data locally, or they don't want to have a big machine to do Prometheus queries. So here comes the Prometheus agent. The Prometheus agent is a special flag that you can pass to your Prometheus configuration, and when you do that, Prometheus will not store the data locally, it will just keep enough data to send to another Prometheus server or another Thanos, Mimir, Cortex, anything that will support the Prometheus remote write protocol, which means that you can now deploy Prometheus a bit more at the edge of your infrastructure if you want to. The downside is that you cannot actually query the data locally, so you cannot do alerting rules, you cannot do querying, so you need to rely on the external solution to do that. But the upside is that you have a more efficient Prometheus server, because we removed a lot of features out of it. So it's a flag that you have to enable, and then yeah, you can just use all the features of Prometheus that you want that for your use case, and just like do the querying using Thanos or other solutions. Which comes to another point. So Prometheus historically had a feature called federation. We still have it. It's meant to basically, when you have a Prometheus server, you can use recording rules to aggregate some data or to make some alerting. And those aggregated metrics, you can also pass them to another Prometheus server using federation. You can do federation with more than just recording rules, of course. You could try to do federation for a complete Prometheus server, but it was not really efficient unless you had a very small Prometheus server. So now we have implemented a remote write receiver in Prometheus, which means that if you have two Prometheus servers, you can say to one Prometheus server, please stream all your data to another Prometheus server. And the new thing is that Prometheus server now can receive that protocol natively. So this is a way to decentralize the Prometheus servers a bit, so you can have one central Prometheus server that will get the data from many other Prometheus servers. So Prometheus scales vertically, so if you don't have a big machine enough, this will not be very useful for you, and you might want to look for solutions like Thanos, Cortex, Mimir, but or other ones. But basically, if you are in a quite small setup and you just need to have a decentralized Prometheus, and you want to just send or even use the agent, send that to another Prometheus server, then you can just use that feature now. Next up is the service discovery. So Prometheus is a lot more useful when you are configuring it dynamically. And when I mean dynamically, I mean when it matches your actual infrastructure. And over the past years, we have added a lot of different service discoveries, namely like Docker was one of the most requested one that we added. We have Docker Swarm because apparently it's not dead yet. Some of the service discoveries are not really meant to be used directly in the Prometheus configuration, but they are used when Prometheus is integrated with third-party application. I'm thinking about Uyuni, and the other one is Kuma. Basically, those ones will generally come with Prometheus, and they will use a service discovery integrated in a server, but you don't really have to do it yourself. And we also have more and more cloud providers, so Vultr, Linode, OVH is the last one that was released last week. We have more cloud providers working on new integration, so the list will still grow, and we are very happy to welcome all those new users and all those new features directly into the Prometheus server, which is something that works really well when there are nice APIs with a service with your cloud providers, but this is not the case for all the different service discoveries. So next to those service discoveries, we are also implementing, well, we have implemented an HTTP service discovery, and the goal of that HTTP service discovery is when you have an application that does not support Golang, or you don't have a nice client library to integrate with Prometheus. Then you can just say, okay, my application will provide the targets to Prometheus using HTTP. So we are using JSON and REST API calls to the service discoveries, and basically we get the targets back. This is useful. The first use case was actually NetBox. So NetBox is a CMDB from DigitalOcean that has been open source. And when I decided to add more service discoveries to Prometheus, it was on my radar. I was really like, yeah, I want NetBox support for Prometheus. I know users want that, and I know there is a sidecar that can write to a file targets, but it's not super practical to always have sidecar next to your Prometheus server. So I was like, how can we integrate NetBox into Prometheus? And then I started looking at Golang client for NetBox, and it was like really disappointing. Disappointing as basically non-existent, and the few ones that existed were like, yeah, this is not really maintained, or it's not meant to be very generic, so use with caution. And as an upstream project, you don't really want to, in 6 months, take ownership of a NetBox client library because you are using it in your service discovery. So with the HTTP service discovery, the NetBox community themselves, they were able to write a plugin for NetBox. So just in your NetBox installation, you can say, okay, I installed the Prometheus service discovery plugin, and I have my targets available in Prometheus itself. So that's really like, I think, something really, really interesting for Prometheus and for the communities out there that don't have the chance to have native Golang implementation, or even if you want to integrate Prometheus with your proprietary CMDB that you have in-house, you can also now do that with that API. Next up, so is relabeling. So relabeling in Prometheus is basically the way to set up your targets in a way that you can easily find them. So you can label them with your data center ID, with your location, with anything that you want. But there is another function of relabeling, is when you do the target relabeling, you can also configure your targets. So for example, you can say that in the label that you get for your cloud provider, you can use Kubernetes annotation to say, okay, do not take my metrics from /metrics, but from /API /v1 /metrics. You can do that using Kubernetes annotations. What we have added now is the ability to also change the script interval and the script timeout for certain targets, which means that within one job, you can also have different script interval and script timeout. So we can imagine a scenario when you have a Kubernetes environment and you only want to have one script job for your pods, and you can say, okay, this is a slow pod. Like, I don't want the metrics to be taken every 30 seconds, but I want them one every minute. And now you can do that using relabeling and using those special labels that we have added. And also, when we developed some of the new service discoveries, I think it was Ionos Cloud, we did get a few strange labels back from the API, like everything like uppercase. So I was like, yeah, but so there is probably a use case to get new relabeling actions, uppercase and lowercase. So PromQL. So PromQL is the query language of Prometheus. And it has been evolving quite a lot in the past 2 years, mainly because our users come to us and they say, yeah, I'm using Prometheus with wind turbines and I would like to do like trigonometry on it. I'm like, okay, so we took the time to see, okay, which function would be actually useful, and we ended up with like now having trigonometry in Prometheus. So for example, you have pi now, so and oh, sorry, let's fix it. And you can do everything that you would expect from. Oh yes, oops. Yeah. So you can do trigonometry directly in Prometheus with your data in a way that's useful or not useful. For example, if I do up, oops. Again, this is not something that I would call useful, but it works. So you now have a bit more power regarding that, and for those who like also mathematics, I think if I do, will this work, or do I also need? Yeah, okay. If I do this, okay. So we also have functions to like get the sign of a metric. So you have 1 when the value is positive, 0 when it's 0, and -1 when it's negative. So what's important in all those functions that we are adding is not really that we are adding new function. It is that we see Prometheus being used in more and more different use cases. So I find it pretty cool to have all those new functions and all those users coming to us and saying, yeah, we need new functions. So we are not adding every function out there that a user requests, because some of them are like interesting, let's say, but we try to bring Prometheus to new use cases. One other function that we have been added, which might be useful for many people, is the function called last over time. So the last over time function just takes a metric and gives you the last value. So if I just take the up metrics, for example, I will go in the future. Yes, we can also go in the future now. So I see that I don't have any metrics, but I can now do last over time, and it will just show me the last value for the last, let's say, 2 hours. So now, if you have this is useful when you have, for example, a third-party exporter, or you fetch metrics from an API which is not super stable, and you want to use that in your alerting rule to say, okay, I know that this API might not be available for like 10 minutes every hour. I still want to be alerted on that. One of the use cases that we have for that is we have a third-party API that provides us the balance on our account. And then we can just say, okay, when it's not done, we will assume that the last value we get is still valid, and we can still at least alert on that. So this is the last overtime function. Okay, so this is an overview of what we have with PromQL. We have other new functions that I've not covered yet. You can just find the documentation. Well, basically, if you have an issue with PromQL, if you look for something, you should be able to find your way in the documentation. So now I was saying that we could look in the future. So you have a feature in PromQL called the offset. Like, for example, if we call the up metric, for example, let's get back to now. Maybe we should shut something down. What can we do? Or we can let's write a new exporter quickly. Well, there is actually one. Okay. So I have created an empty file, and I'm serving the empty file over the port 9000. This should be enough for Prometheus to scrape 0 metrics out of it, but it should still see it as something that's up. And if I now add that to my Prometheus configuration, like this, I can reload my Prometheus config, check in the runtime and build that the configuration was reloaded. So in the targets, I should see that the OSMC endpoint is up. So now I can actually kill it. So now if I have up, chop is OSMC. So we also have auto-completion for the label values, which is also very, very handy. So, okay. And now I can decide to offset that in time. So if I want to do offset 5 minutes, I can just have my data I need to look in the future now, but I can see how the data that I had was just shifted into, well, when I'm querying at 10:50 UTC, I actually see the value that was there at 10:45 UTC. But you can now do the opposite, so you can also now do negative offsets, which is something which is pretty new. So instead of shifting in one way, you can just shift in the other way. One use case for this was one of our partners. They did provide us Prometheus metrics, but they were delayed by 20 minutes. So we kind of had to use Grafana and the time shift feature of Grafana to say, yeah, I want to see the data, but 20 minutes in the future, please. And this was not possible with PromQL, but now we have that feature which is available, which I think is really, really nice. And the next feature is the at modifier in PromQL. So if we take a query like rate, let's take, for example, Prometheus HTTP request total 5 minutes. Let's take it from now, and let's look what it looks like. So we have a lot of different features. Now, let's say that we only want to see the top 5. So we would use the function called topk in PromQL. So that would show us the top 5 HTTP requests per second. But what you can see is that at some points you actually have like, yeah, this is like the top 5, but for every data point, for every step in your query. But it might not be what you want. What you want is just to see, okay, we have the top 5 now. So we want to see now, we want to see the evolution of the ones that are now the top 5 rate functions. So now what you can do, you can use the at sign and say, okay, I want to see what it looks like at the end of my query. And you need to do this at this place, like this, and execute. Of course, this is showing you the value at the end. So for all the data points, you have the same value. So you need to still use the first rate as a selector. So if we do this now, like this, so now we see that, so those are the top 5 at the end of my query, but I can see the evolution over time because of this function, which is acting as one side is like the selector of what you want to see. Well, it is the values that we want to see. And the top k function at the end with the add timestamp is telling you, okay, I want to see the top k calculated at the end of my query. And when Prometheus is doing the matching between those two, you actually have your end result that looks like this. So now it's very easy to do that kind of debugging. So I find it also a really nice feature. It's top k obviously is just an example. You can use any functions that you want, for example, max over time, that kind of thing. So everything is now possible. So this opens also a new range of possibilities with PromQL. That's the at modifier. So we support the end after the at. So that's the end of the query. We also support the start, and you can also put any custom timestamp that you would want. If you know a timestamp by heart, it will also work. So formatting queries, I have already shown that in the UI. It is coming to Prometheus soon, I hope, so you will be able to also format the queries inside of a rule file directly. And the next feature that we have added in the server is Go Max Procs. So basically, when you are in a Linux container environment and you have CPU quotas, now you can tell Prometheus to kind of please adapt your process to the quotas that you have. So don't try to use 10,000 CPUs if we only enable you to access 2 or 3 CPUs. Native histograms. So this is a new feature. I don't have a demo for it yet, but basically the way that Prometheus histograms used to work is that you have a few set of defined buckets, and you could then say, okay, I have that many queries that took between 0 and 10 seconds, and then that many queries that took between 0 and 20 seconds, and you can sort of guess, well, calculate the quantile response time for your queries. Now we are introducing a new way to do histograms, which will use dynamic buckets first and exponential buckets. So it means that you will get way more reliable histograms in Prometheus, and you will be able to better calculate your percentage. So if you want to know how fast did 99% of your requests take, you will be able to do that easily with the new histograms. One of the big changes with the new native histograms is that they will be scraped using not the text format but protobuf. So we are reintroducing a very old Prometheus feature, which was protobuf for metrics, for this new feature, and because the structure of the histograms is a lot more complex than it used to be, but for the client library, for example, it's not a big change. You don't need to reinstall your application, and also the client libraries will still be able to output the text format. So if you want to debug using curl, you will still be able to do that, but you might not be able to see the new histograms directly in the text format. But all the other metrics will still be available in text format, but you are introducing those new histograms to provide a lot more accurate SLO calculation to Prometheus and anything related to histograms. Then we have out-of-order ingestion. So Prometheus is basically a monitoring solution. So we expect to scrape the targets now, but what if the target is not available now, or what if you are migrating from other monitoring solution, or just you have misconfiguration in some targets? We have a new configuration parameter now, which is the out-of-order ingestion. So it means that now the TSDB of Prometheus can ingest data in not 1 to 3 timestamp, but like 3 to 1 timestamp. So you can just ingest the data when you want. So let's try it out. It's new, so I don't know by hand. I don't know by heart all the config things. So let's look at the documentation. What's the name of the parameter? Okay, so we have storage TSDB, which means time series database, and out of order time window. And I want to be flexible and to enable, for example, let's say 2 days of out of order metrics. I do this and I just reload my Prometheus server. I'm not 100% sure that it works by reloading the Prometheus server, so we will just find out, I guess. So let's get back to my Prometheus server. So normally you would not do that like I do it today, because today I will just use the text format to ingest a null metric. In the real world, you would probably use remote write to ingest all old metrics. So if I now query, for example, the metric foo, I have nothing, I guess. Okay, I will make a metric foo. So foo, oops, I need to give him a value. The value is 1. So now I have a metric foo with the value 1. What I will do is I will use last over time foo with 1 hour, so that when I look at 24 hours of data, I will actually be able to see if there is something else. But yeah, it's really like I'm looking at the last 6 hours, 1 day. Yeah. So really like there is no foo in my Prometheus server in the last 12 hours except the ones that I have now. So okay, so now we are looking at the last 12 hours. What if I now want to ingest an old foo? So I have enabled Prometheus to scrape like up to two days of historical data. So I will take a timestamp from like, I don't know, 6 hours ago. Something like this should work. No, like this. I added so in the Prometheus exposition format, you can optionally attach a timestamp to your metric. If you are using the Prometheus text format, it is in milliseconds. If you are using OpenMetrics, it is in seconds. In this case, we are just using the text format. So now we should have a full metric from 6 hours ago. So if I execute it, okay. So now we see that we have been able to ingest a matrix from Prometheus that was 6 hours ago, which is a feature that is coming that did come in Prometheus 2.39, so like 6 weeks ago. So now you can, if you have an advanced monitoring scenario, or if you somehow need to ingest some kind of old data, you can, with some limits, but you can do it in Prometheus. If you don't have that, so if I now try to remove that parameter, and I will just take like 3 hours ago to try to ingest something else. First I will reload my Prometheus configuration. So let's try this again. And now hopefully, so the data from 3 hours ago is not ingested. So if you are using Prometheus in a traditional way, if you don't change your configuration, of course, Prometheus will continue to behave the exact same way as it did. So if you have a broken Prometheus server which is not in the correct time, you will not screw up your setup. Prometheus will just tell you, oh, what is this data? I don't want it. So long-term support. If one of the nightmares of the Prometheus administrator sometimes is that, yeah, I am using Prometheus 2.30, but now it's Prometheus 2.40. And the thing is that Prometheus itself is pretty much forward compatible. So you can always upgrade your Prometheus servers. We really try very, very hard not to break you. We only want to bring you new features. We never want to change the way Prometheus behaves for you. So you should always be able to upgrade within Prometheus 2.x to the latest 2.x series. The thing is that, as with any software, some features are quite important and they change quite a lot of code. So sometimes we have new bugs. So that's why we are introducing a long-term support version of Prometheus. So which means that instead of upgrading every 6 weeks, we support Prometheus for at least 6 months. So currently we have released Prometheus 2.37 in July, and we are still supporting that version. So if you want to upgrade to a newer Prometheus version, you can take Prometheus 2.37, and we will actually fix the bugs for at least 6 months. We are thinking about just extending that to 1 year. And probably somewhere about Prometheus 2.42, take a new LTS and bring that LTS also for 6 months or 1 year. So this will help also enterprises adopting Prometheus, because now they know, okay, if we test against Prometheus 2.37, we know that we can rely on that version and that we can move on and just use that LTS version. It is available just like any other Prometheus versions. For example, if you go to prometheus.io/downloads, you will see that you have both the latest version, download. You can see that you have the latest version, but you also have the LTS version. So it's pretty easy to find. And also when you are looking at the documentation of Prometheus, we are versioning the documentation. So you can pick the version of Prometheus that you want to look the documentation for, and you can see also that we have marked LTS in a special way, so you can find it easily in the version dropdown. Next up is Prometheus as a Go library. So many project depends on the Prometheus code base, mainly Tynos, Mimir, but also people writing PromQL, PromQL expression generator, parser, anything you can think of. People are using the Prometheus code base. We also have projects using the service discovery part of Prometheus, and we wanted to find a solution to deal with those users, because the way of the Go ecosystem is working. If we release Prometheus 2.40.0, it was not possible to have a library called Prometheus 2.40.0 because 2.40.0 is for the end users, but we want to be free to change the interfaces behind versions. So what we have done is that we are releasing now, next to every major release, we are releasing a v0.40.0 release, for example, so that the project like Thanos, Mimir, Cortex, now they can depend on the Prometheus version upstream easy in the go.mod without needing to use git commits as a version, because it does not really super nice. And we actually see bug reports of people that tell us, okay, we are using that new Go.mod stuff, and using version 0 something means that as an upstream library, we can still innovate and change the interfaces while getting some clarity on the users of the interfaces that, yeah, it might change. So when you have an update, you still have to read the Prometheus change log to see if something might affect you. But in general, this is working well now, and it has been an issue in Prometheus for quite a long time. We also have a plugin system now. It's not really designed for end users because, like, it is when you are building Prometheus. So if you are Prometheus is an open source project, so everyone can build and ship it. But the binary size now, because of all the new fancy features, is more than 100 megabytes, and we will keep adding new service discoveries, so it will probably still grow a bit. But now we have a plugins.yaml system, so you can easily, if I go to my Prometheus, I can see that there is a plugins.yaml file which tells me, okay, this is all the service discoveries that are enabled in Prometheus, and when I will run make build to build Prometheus, I will actually have a full-blown Prometheus server. So now, for example, if I want to rebuild Prometheus server, but I only want to keep, because in my infrastructure I only use it only using Linode servers, I can now run make build. Let me just check something first. I can run make plugins, which will adapt the Prometheus code to the plugins, and if I run make build, with my Prometheus environment, normally we will have a Prometheus binary, which will be a lot less, it will take a lot less disk space than what we had to with the full service discovery. So it's building the UI now, and hopefully after that we will have just a new UI. So this is mainly done so that distributions, even like if you want to be the lighter Docker image for Prometheus because you are only using Kubernetes, you can tear down the size of the binary. So okay, now it's building the Prometheus binary. So surprise, surprise, it should not take that long. Hey, we are building a fully featured monitoring solution now. So Prometheus is built, and now the size is 43 megabytes. So we are going from 110 megabytes to 43. If you are using Kubernetes, then you can get it down to 7 megabytes from my test from this morning. So it will depend on the service discoveries that you are using. But yeah, if you're interested into, if you think that Prometheus binary size is too high, you can always now look at how to improve things and how you want to use the new plugin system to reduce the size of your Prometheus binary. So let me check the time. Okay, let's have a look at the alert manager. So the alert manager, basically what we have now in the latest feature of the alert manager. So alert manager is responsible mainly for sending the notification to the users. Now you can say, okay, if I am on call, I don't want, if I have an on-call team, I only want them to receive the alert during the night. So now we have time-based muting for receivers, and we also have negative matchers. So the way that the alert manager is working, it is actually routing the alerts based on the labels. And you could say in the past, like, send me all the labels that match the environment production, for example. So if you have a label environment and production, you could do that. Now in the new alert manager, you can also do, please send me all the notification, but the one that match development. So it's another way to route your alerts, which makes it also very flexible. As I said, the alert manager is in charge of getting the notification in your pocket. But what if you are not using Slack, PagerDuty, or any of the NAS features? We are bringing new receivers into the alert manager. So we have AWS SNS that is available now. We are integrated with Telegram, and Discord is coming soon. So you can receive your alert on Discord in the next alert manager release. So it brings new use cases for the alert manager, and we just try to find you wherever you are, and we try to reduce the number of sidecars that you have to integrate next to your alert manager. For example, I think that Telegram was a dedicated project, so we did bring it back inside the alert manager code base. And Discord, there was also a third-party integration, but that one, I'm not sure that we did bring it back to the main, or if we just used another person implementation. But basically, we just try to reduce the number of sidecars you have to run. You want to find you where you are and send you the notification directly with the application that you are using. The exporters. So the exporters are all the software that exports Prometheus metrics when your application is not talking it natively. In 2020, I think we launched the Exporter Toolkit, which is a Golang toolkit that aims at bringing unified experience when you are writing exporters. And that will deal with stuff like TLS basic authentication, so that when you see an exporter using that library, you know the command line flags that you can use, and you know how to configure it. So we are adding new way to reach the exporter. So we are adding systemd socket activation, so that when you are using an exporter and you want to start it directly, but only when Prometheus is starting to scrape, then you can use systemd socket activation. It means that the exporter will be stopped, and when systemd will receive a request for your exporter, it will actually like start the exporter and pass the request, and then your exporter will be started. But it also means that if you have a system that is not monitored, that Prometheus does not get its metrics, then you don't need to have the exporter started. You can just use the systemd socket activation. Another way to reach the exporter is with multiple bind addresses. So if you have a multi-home machine, you might not want Prometheus to listen on the public IP address, but you still might want to have it listening on maybe localhost and another private IP address. Now you can use the web.listen address multiple times. This is being, those two features are being rolled out to all the exporters, so it will not reach them like directly, but some of the exporter will get it quite soon. It's already in the main branch, for example, for the node exporter. The node exporter, which is the exporter responsible for monitoring the Linux machines. So that new exporter is getting new collectors. Some of them are listed here, like the cctl collector. It's really nice because everything that you have in your file system can now be read by the node exporter. You can write your own filters. For example, I could write an exporter to get the brightness of my laptop, which might not be super useful, but yeah, in some people might find that those kind of collectors super useful for their use case, especially regarding the performance information you can get for your machine and all the configuration you can see out of your metrics. We have a Linux exporter now, and we also have some more like classifier collectors, I would say, so you can know the BIOS version of the machine in your metrics, and also know the OS release, like so you can monitor your fleet a bit more easily with Prometheus and get again more data directly out of your node exporter. MySQL exporter. The MySQL exporter has multi-target in the next release, which means that You don't have to run one instance of the exporter for each database that you want to monitor. So if you have 10 different databases, maybe even running on the same server, you don't need 10 different MySQL exporter anymore. You can just do with one exporter and talk with all those different databases. The black box exporter is getting a hostname parameter, which means that you can pass an IP address to the node exporter and then say, okay, this is the hostname I want to reach. And when we are doing HTTP probes, we can say, okay, this is what we want to use as the host header, but also as SNI. For example, if you want to monitor Prometheus.io, you will see like that there are like 4 different IP addresses. Up to now, you had to pick one. Or you just tell, okay, just use Prometheus.io, we would do the DNS resolution, and then we would just pick one of them. Now, if you couple that with the DNS SD config, you can actually say, okay, I want to query every of the IP addresses, but I still want to pass the host name Prometheus.io. So, yeah, this is very useful when you have multiple IP addresses and you want to just combine that and just test all of them easily. When you are using a proxy, you can also now skip the DNS phase in the black box exporter, because some proxies, they like to do the DNS for you. And if you just tell them, give them an IP address, they will just say, no, 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 no. So you can also now bypass those kind of proxies. And we also have support now for gRPC. So in the gRPC protocol, there is a health check that can be used. And the black box exporter now can speak that language. And if you have a gRPC enabled service that supports that health check protocol, you can just use that. Some updates about the ecosystem. So we now have an official Rust client. So Rust has been on the rise, and of course there are multiple Prometheus clients for Rust. There is one which is more popular than this one because it's historical, but it was based on the client Golang, so it means that it did follow the way that the Go client was working, while this client is more, how to say that, is more Rust oriented, so it just follows more the Rust way of doing things. We have Prometheus community, which is a new GitHub organization that was created, I think, in 2019. But now we have reached more than 30 repositories there. So the goal is to have a common home for different exporters that are still under the Prometheus governance, and where we can have the projects that are no longer maintained actively. We can just pass them to the Prometheus community, and then we have new maintainers for them that make the project and that make them live also. We have some new ones like the ECS exporter for AWS ECS, and some very practical ones like, for example, the JSON exporter can just talk to JSON APIs and extract metrics out of that. So if you have a JSON API that returns numbers, you can just use the JSON exporter to take metrics out of that. We are also hosting now the Helm charts of Prometheus in that Prometheus community organization. The Postgres exporter also now supports multi-target in 0.12. Not sure if the final release is out, but the release candidate is out. So you can also do the same as the MySQL exporter for Postgres. So you don't need a one-to-one relationship between databases and Postgres exporter anymore. We have Avalanche. It's a project from 2018, but now we have bring it back to the Prometheus community as well, which is basically a project that will generate tons of metrics. So you can load test your Prometheus setup and your remote write solution. So if you want to, if you are writing a new remote write endpoint, you want to test it, you can try Avalanche, and it will probably do its best to crash your solution. There is a new certification also for Prometheus. So if you want to show the world that you know well Prometheus and you are into certification, you can look at the certification. It was launched in September, and it's under the Linux Foundation Training and Certification Organization. And there is also a conference program for Prometheus. This is defined mainly for cloud providers or a project that say that they support the Prometheus. So if you support PromQL, if you support remote write, we are launching soon a conformance program so that you can have a badge saying, okay, we have been tested and we are actually complying with the way that PromQL is working. So this is also coming in the next few months, and we aim to have a few cloud providers and other solutions part of that conformance program, so that we can actually launch and say, okay, this is the project that are Prometheus approved, that are Prometheus compliant, that you can use if you want to migrate for your metrics from one solution to the other and still get the same output from your PromQL queries. And the last thing is PromLens. So I still have 5 minutes. So PromLens is okay, PromLens. PromLens is software that was commercial, but now since last year it has been open sourced, and basically it is a query builder for Prometheus that enables you to improve your queries and deal with your data and do anything that you would want with your query. So, for example, if I type up, I see the values for up, I have a graph, but I also have explain, which tells me, okay, what is up doing? And then with this node, select the matrix where the name is up. If we go for a more complex query, like rate HTTP request, oh yeah, this is, let's point it at my local Prometheus. Of course, Prometheus HTTP request total 5 minutes. So now I can see that I can see the composition of my query. So there is a read command and there is a Prometheus HTTP request total, and I can click on any of them and it will explain me every part. If I now do, so if I look at the table, what do I have? Okay. If I now want to do a crazier query, like I want to do plus up, which does not make any sense Prometheus-wise, but if we now go to the explain part, we'll actually see the screen is not large enough, so let's cheat about it. Oops. What am I doing wrong now? It is, so you see it's underlined in red, so I know where it's wrong. And now, okay. So now if I go to my table, I see, oh, my PromQL does not have any result. Why don't I get any result? And you can see actually, like for each one of the steps, like sum has 8 results, rate 43, and that one has also 13 results. So it's like, okay, this is the plus that has 0 result. I can go to explain, and it will show me that this is the less value, this is the right labels, and yeah, if that does not match, I don't have any good output. So what I can do now, I will go back to my query. I will try to also remove the instance because I'm using quite long instances. Okay, so now we see both sides, and we can see that all the values are dropped because there is no corresponding values. What I will do now is I will just do, I will try to get the same labels on both sides. Like, I will just do my job. And the other side, I will also try to do the same. And the table is showing me now, I should run it first, right? Please run it. Okay. So now I can see that there are a bunch of values on the right of my query that do not have anything on the left. That's why I have all the values dropped, but I do have one result now, and that is where the left labels and the right labels are the same. And basically this provides a new way to find out why your PromQL query is not returning the result that you want, or where you get specific results, because that is what PromLens is giving you. But if you just go to the table of Prometheus, you just see the output. This is what you get in the Prometheus UI, but PromLens actually shows you all the labels and how Prometheus is actually doing all the corresponding things. This is now this has been open sourced by Chronosphere, and it's now part of the Prometheus Promosphere and Prom Labs. It is now part of the Prometheus organization, so it's a fully supported Prometheus project now. And that is what I had for you today for the Prometheus ecosystem update. Just checking. Yes, that's actually it. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now, or I will also be around all day today, so just find me. I have a Prometheus lanyard.
Thank you so much, Julien. Thank you for that insightful talk. Here is your present.
Thank you.
Thanks for contribution. Thanks for your contribution. There we go, tongue twister. All right, we're ready for some questions before lunch break. If there are some, yes, there is one.
You should not have said before lunch break, because now they
I'm
only
taking
want to go to
everything
lunch.
back. No lunch break, no, no, no.
Thanks for the talk. Very interesting and informative. The histogram changes are particularly interesting. When is that due to be released?
Last week. So
Nice.
so basically it is released, but it is super experimental at the moment. And I would encourage you to look at the PromCon talks last week, when they also explained how to deal with PromQL, how to query that, and how to expose that. Currently, they are supported in the latest client Golang library, and the support for that is coming in Java quite soon as well.
And that doesn't fit into open metrics, so I guess that's part of 2.0 or something, right?
It doesn't
Maybe.
fit into OpenMetrics, so we are still looking at the option to fit into how we will fit that into OpenMetrics. Currently, it's part of plain Prometheus projects. Another thing that I did not mention, which has also been interesting, is that OpenTelemetry metrics support is coming to Prometheus in the coming months. So we are currently, you have to use the OpenTelemetry collector to convert metrics to Prometheus, but we aim to move that part to Prometheus itself. So if you are also using OpenTelemetry metrics, you will also be able to do that natively with Prometheus.
So OTLP support inside Prometheus?
Yes.
Okay, very nice.
It's
Thank
coming
you.
in. It is not there yet, but it's coming in the next releases.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm coming. Marcus, here you go.
So I was wondering if PromLens, which is quite a nice tool, will be integrated into the UI, it's like the native
Yes.
Prometheus UI. I've seen Julius was mentioning that in an issue. Is there a timetable on that?
There is no timetable, and not the complete feature set of PromLens will be integrated. Like, for example, PromLens enables you to share queries, or to you also have some features like the form part. We are not sure that all those advanced features of PromLens will be available into Prometheus, but definitively, like, a lot of PromLens will be directly available in the UI. But I don't have a timeline on that yet.
One more question, yes.
Hi, when running in agent mode, is it possible to federate the agent, or is it limited to remote writes?
So the agents are only using remote write. You could federate using another agent that has the remote write receiver enabled, but by default, there is no kind of federation like for the agent. You just push to another endpoint. That endpoint could be a bigger agent if you want.